The bullet grazed her shoulder the same moment she stepped into the spotlight. Blood bloomed against white silk as 500 guests gasped. He rose from his throne-like chair, eyes locked on the curvy African woman who refused to fall. She met his gaze across the ballroom, fury and pain blazing in her dark eyes, and something impossible awakened in his chest. Something that felt like recognition. Like fate. Like the end of everything he'd built and the beginning of everything he'd denied himself. Park Jin-woo, Seoul's most feared mafia boss, had just found the one woman who could destroy him. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 weeks earlier, Amarachi Okafor stood in the lobby of the Park family estate, her heart hammering against her ribs as she clutched her acceptance letter. The bride competition. It sounded like something from a historical drama, not real life in modern Seoul. But the terms were clear. 30 women would compete through a series of tests for the honor of becoming Park Jin-woo's wife. Win or lose, every participant's family would receive substantial financial compensation. For Amarachi, that meant her younger brother could finally get the spinal surgery he desperately needed. She would endure any humiliation for that. The grand doors opened, and a severe-looking woman in traditional hanbok gestured for the candidates to enter. Amarachi took a breath and stepped forward, her purple and gold Nigerian wrapper swishing around her curves. She was the only non-Korean woman here. The only one who looked like she didn't belong. Every other candidate wore expensive designer gowns, their hair and makeup perfect, their expressions confident. They'd been groomed for this their entire lives. Amarachi had learned about the competition 3 weeks ago. The first test was announced immediately. Elegance and grace. The candidates would walk across the ballroom floor while judges assessed their deportment, posture, and refinement. 29 women glided forward like swans, each movement practiced and flawless. Then it was Amarachi's turn. She walked with her head high, her natural confidence carrying her forward, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She wasn't trained for this. Wasn't prepared. Was simply herself, and that terrified her. From his elevated position at the far end of the ballroom, Park Jin-woo watched with dead eyes. He'd agreed to this medieval spectacle only because his counsel insisted. At 32, his continued bachelorhood was being interpreted as weakness. A man who couldn't secure his bloodline couldn't be trusted to secure territory. So he'd consented to the competition. But he'd designed the tests to eliminate candidates. He wanted them all to fail. He wanted to remain alone, untouchable, focused only on the empire that consumed his every waking moment. Then she walked into his line of sight, and everything stopped. Amarachi moved across the ballroom floor in traditional African dress, her curves unapologetic, her dark skin glowing under crystal chandeliers, her braided hair adorned with gold beads. She was beautiful. Terrified. Fighting to hide it. And completely, utterly real in a room full of perfectly crafted illusions. Jin-woo sat forward slightly, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. His pulse quickened in a way he didn't recognize. His chest tightened with something that felt dangerous and inevitable. He told himself it was simple attraction. A physical response to an unusual woman. But even as the thought formed, he knew he was lying. This was something else. Something that made his carefully constructed walls tremble. The head judge, an elderly woman from one of Seoul's oldest crime families, looked Amarachi up and down with unconcealed disapproval. Your traditional dress is inappropriate for a formal Korean function. In the Park family, we value respect for our customs above all else. Amarachi's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. With respect, ma'am, I was told this competition welcomed women from various backgrounds. I'm honoring my heritage while showing respect for this opportunity. Your Korean is adequate but accented. That's a mark against you. The judge made a note on her tablet. Jin-woo watched the flash of hurt cross Amarachi's face before she buried it. His hands clenched into fists. A muscle jumped in his jaw. He wanted to stand up, walk down to that judging panel, and tell them exactly what he thought of their narrow assessment. Instead, he remained frozen, struggling against the unfamiliar rage burning through his chest. Who was this woman, and why did her pain affect him like a physical blow? The judge dismissed Amarachi with a wave, and she walked to join the other candidates with her spine straight and her expression carefully neutral. Jinwoo's eyes followed her across the room. He couldn't look away. Didn't want to look away. Something inside him had shifted the moment she'd entered the ballroom, and he had the unsettling feeling that nothing would ever be the same. His head of security approached quietly. "Sir, the first test is complete. Should we proceed to the second round tomorrow?" Jinwoo nodded, still watching Amarachi as she stood apart from the other women, isolated and proud. "Increase security on all candidates. Especially her." He gestured toward Amarachi without taking his eyes off her. "Yes, sir." "Is there a specific threat?" "Just do it." That night, Amarachi sat alone in her assigned room, a beautiful prison of silk and mahogany. She pulled out her phone and called home. Her brother answered immediately. "Neoma, how's the fancy competition? Are you winning?" "I failed the first test spectacularly. They didn't like my outfit or my accent or probably anything about me." Amarachi tried to keep her voice light, but exhaustion bled through. "Then why stay?" "Because they're still paying us regardless. And because," she paused, her voice dropping, "something strange is happening here." "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet." She didn't tell her brother about Park Jinwoo. About the way she'd felt his gaze on her during the test, heavy and intense and unreadable. About how when their eyes had met across the ballroom, her breath had caught in her throat and her heart had stuttered in a way that had nothing to do with fear. She'd researched him before agreeing to the competition. Park Jinwoo. Orphaned at 15 when his parents were killed in a rival gang war. Took over his father's organization at 25 and transformed it into Seoul's most powerful criminal syndicate. Known for being ruthless, strategic, and completely isolated. Men feared him. Women wanted him. And he remained alone at the top of his empire, surrounded by enemies and sycophants but close to no one. The next morning brought the second test. Household management. The candidates were taken to a traditional Korean home and instructed to prepare a meal for unexpected guests using only available ingredients. It was designed to test adaptability, cultural knowledge, and grace under pressure. 28 women produced variations of elegant Korean dishes. Competent. Forgettable. Safe. Amarachi made jollof rice. The judges stared at the vibrant red rice studded with vegetables and chicken as if she'd served them poison. "This is not Korean cuisine." The head judge's voice was ice. Amarachi met her gaze directly, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "No, ma'am. But you asked us to prepare a meal for unexpected guests with available ingredients. In my culture, when guests arrive unexpectedly, you offer them the best of what you have. This is the best of what I can offer. It's an insult to our traditions. It's an invitation to understand mine." Amarachi's tone remained respectful, but something in her eyes flashed with challenge. If the Park family values only its own traditions, perhaps this isn't the right match. Perhaps not. The head judge marked another failure on her tablet without even tasting the food. Jinwoo stood in the observation room, watching through one-way glass, his hands clenched in his pockets. His jaw was so tight it ached. When the judges dismissed Amarachi's offering without tasting it, rage flooded through him with startling intensity. She'd worked hard on that meal. He'd watched her cook, her movements confident and practiced, her face lighting up as she added spices and stirred the pot. She'd created something from her heart, and they'd rejected it without even giving it a chance. His head of security cleared his throat. "Sir, should I have her removed from the competition? The judges have made it clear she's not suitable." "No." Jinwoo's voice came out rougher than intended. She continues. "But sir, she's failed 2 tests. She hasn't failed anything." Jinwoo turned from the window, his dark eyes burning with something he couldn't name and wouldn't acknowledge. "She's the only one who's been honest. The only one who hasn't performed. The only one who's real." He walked toward the door, his mind already making calculations. "Have someone taste her food. I want to know if it's actually good or if she's just being stubborn. And increase her security detail again. Make it discreet, but make sure she's protected every moment she's on this estate. Later that evening, Jinwoo sat in his private study, a plate of jollof rice in front of him. His assistant had retrieved a serving before the judges could dispose of it. He took a bite, and flavor exploded across his tongue. Rich, complex, perfectly balanced. It was delicious. Better than delicious. It was a revelation. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and thought about the woman who'd made it. Amarachi. He'd learned her full name now. Amarachi Okafor. 27 years old. Studied international relations at university in Nigeria before moving to Seoul 2 years ago to be closer to her brother, who was receiving medical treatment here. Worked 3 jobs to pay for his care. Applied to the competition out of desperation, not ambition. Everything about her file suggested she was exactly what she appeared to be. Genuine. Principled. Completely unsuited for his world. And he couldn't stop thinking about her. He set down his fork and pulled up the security footage from that day's test. He watched Amarachi cook, her movements graceful and sure, her face animated as she worked. He watched her present her dish with quiet pride. He watched the hurt flash across her features when the judges rejected her without consideration. And he felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd kept locked away for 17 years, since the night his parents were murdered and he'd learned that caring about anyone made you vulnerable. The third test came 2 days later. Diplomacy. The candidates attended a formal dinner with several of the Park family's business associates. They were expected to charm, entertain, and demonstrate their value as potential partners in both business and life. Amarachi was seated between 2 older men who spoke to her in heavily accented English, clearly assuming she couldn't understand Korean. They discussed her body with casual lewdness, debating her worth as an exotic curiosity versus her unsuitability as a mafia boss's wife. She listened to every word, her expression neutral, her hands folded gracefully in her lap. Then she switched to flawless Korean, her accent minimal and her tone politely venomous. Gentlemen, I appreciate your detailed assessment of my physical attributes. However, if we're discussing suitability, perhaps we should consider whether the Park family wants associates who disrespect women in multiple languages. The table went silent. The 2 men turned red, one with embarrassment and one with rage. Jinwoo sat at the head of the table, a glass of whiskey frozen halfway to his lips, his eyes locked on Amarachi with an expression that made her breath stop. Heat flooded through her body. Fear and awareness and something electric that made her skin prickle. He set down his glass with careful precision, the sound loud in the sudden silence. His voice, when he spoke, was soft. Lethally soft. Anyone who disrespects a candidate in my competition is disrespecting me. The 2 men who just insulted Miss Okafor will leave. Now. But we were just out. The word was quiet. Final. Absolute. The men stumbled to their feet and fled. The remaining dinner guests sat frozen, afraid to move or breathe. Jinwoo's gaze never left Amarachi, and she felt pinned by the intensity in his dark eyes. You speak Korean fluently. I never mentioned that in my application. I wanted to see how people behaved when they thought I couldn't understand them. Smart. What did you learn? That most of your associates are more concerned with appearances than substance. Amarachi met his eyes directly, her heart hammering but her voice steady. That your organization values compliance over competence. And that this entire competition is designed to eliminate anyone with an actual spine. Shocked gasps echoed around the table. Jinwoo's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. It was beautiful and terrifying. You're very observant. I'm very motivated. Her chin lifted slightly. My brother needs surgery. That's the only reason I'm here. I don't care about your money, your power, or your empire. I just need to make it through enough tests to earn the compensation you promised. So if you want to eliminate me, do it. But don't expect me to perform like a trained dog while you decide. The head judge stood abruptly, her face mottled with rage. This insolence is unacceptable. She should be removed immediately. Sit down. Jinwoo didn't look at the judge. His eyes remained fixed on Amarachi with an intensity that made heat pool low in her belly. Miss Okafor passes the third test. But she insulted you. She challenged the entire competition. She told the truth. Jinwoo finally looked away from Amarachi to address the table, and she felt the loss of his gaze like a physical ache. Something none of you have had the courage to do in years. The dinner continued in tense silence, but Amarachi felt Jinwoo's attention return to her again and again. Heavy. Assessing. Hungry. By the time dessert was served, her skin felt too tight and her breath came shallow. What was happening to her? Why did this dangerous man's gaze affect her like a caress? After dinner, as the candidates were being escorted back to their rooms, Jinwoo appeared at Amarachi's side. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Her security detail stepped back immediately, and suddenly she was alone with Seoul's most feared crime lord in a moonlit garden. The night air was cool against her heated skin. Jinwoo walked beside her in silence for several moments, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Why are you really here? I told you. My brother needs surgery. I don't believe that's the only reason. His gaze slid to her, intense and probing. You're intelligent, educated, proud. This competition is humiliating. You could have found other ways to earn money. Not this much money this quickly. Amarachi stopped walking and turned to face him fully. And not without, she paused, vulnerability shining in her eyes, without risking my pride and my dignity in front of strangers who hate me for existing. You think I wanted to come here? To be judged and found wanting over and over? I did it because my brother is the only family I have left, and I would do anything to save him. Anything. Even this. Something shifted in Jinwoo's expression. The hardness softened just slightly. He took a step closer, and Amarachi's breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered, overwhelming in his intensity. Your brother is lucky to have you. She laughed, a bitter sound. Tell that to the judges who keep failing me. You haven't failed. Amarachi blinked. I've failed every single test. No. You've been honest in every single test. There's a difference. He moved closer still, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Leather and smoke and danger. Everyone else is performing. Showing me what they think I want to see. You're showing me who you actually are. And who is that? Her voice came out breathless. Someone brave. Someone loyal. Someone who fights for what matters even when it costs you everything. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. Someone rare. They stood like that for a long moment, the air between them charged and crackling. Amarachi's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. Then Jinwoo stepped back abruptly, his expression shuddering. You should rest. The fourth test is tomorrow. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the shadows and leaving her standing alone in the moonlight, her body trembling and her mind reeling. What had just happened? And why did she feel like something fundamental had shifted between them? That night, Jinwoo sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, staring at nothing. He was losing his mind. That was the only explanation. He'd almost touched her. Almost caressed her face in the moonlight like some lovesick fool. He'd wanted to kiss her so badly his hands had shaken with the need to reach for her. This was unacceptable. Dangerous. He'd built his empire on emotional detachment. On never caring about anyone or anything enough to be manipulated. And this woman, this brave, stubborn, beautiful woman, was threatening to dismantle everything he'd constructed. His second-in-command knocked and entered without waiting for permission. We have a problem. Jinwoo didn't look up from his whiskey. What kind of problem? Several of the other candidates' families have lodged complaints about Miss Okafor. They're saying her continued presence is an insult to the competition's integrity. They want her removed. No. The refusal was instant and absolute. Jinwoo finally looked up, his eyes cold. She stays. They're threatening to withdraw their daughters if she continues. Then let them withdraw. I don't want women who are too weak to handle a little competition. But sir, the council won't like this. They'll see it as you showing favoritism to an outsider. The council can go to hell. Jinwoo stood, his full height and presence suddenly dominating the room. This is my competition. My choice. And I say she stays. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. After his second left, Jinwoo poured another whiskey and acknowledged the truth he'd been avoiding. He didn't just want Amarachi to stay in the competition. He wanted her to win. Wanted her to be his in a way that was primal and possessive and completely insane. The fourth test arrived with brutal clarity. Combat skills. Each candidate would demonstrate basic self-defense techniques and strategic thinking in simulated dangerous scenarios. It was Jinwoo's personal addition to the competition, added over the council's objections. His wife would live in constant danger. She needed to be able to protect herself. 29 women performed adequate defensive moves, clearly coached by expensive instructors in the days leading up to the test. Then came Amarachi. She stepped into the training room wearing athletic clothes that hugged her curves, her braids pulled back, her expression determined. The combat instructor, a former Special Forces soldier who worked as Jinwoo's personal bodyguard, assessed her with skeptical eyes. Show me what you can do. Amarachi didn't hesitate. She moved with surprising speed and precision, executing a series of strikes and defensive maneuvers that showed real training. Not expensive professional instruction, but practical street fighting skills honed through necessity. Jinwoo watched from the observation window, his pulse quickening as she moved. Powerful. Graceful. Completely focused. The instructor nodded approvingly and then signaled for the scenario portion. An attacker in protective gear rushed at Amarachi from behind. She spun, dropped her weight, and used his momentum against him, sending him stumbling. Another attacker came from the side. She blocked, struck his pressure points, and created distance. When 3 attackers came at once, she didn't panic. She assessed, prioritized the biggest threat, and fought with fierce determination. She didn't win. 3 trained fighters overwhelmed her eventually. But she didn't give up. Even when they had her pinned, she kept struggling, kept fighting, her face flushed and her breath coming hard. Jinwoo's hands were pressed flat against the observation window, his entire body tense. Something primal roared through him at the sight of her fighting. At her refusal to submit. At the fire in her eyes even in defeat. The head judge's voice crackled over the intercom. This is inappropriate. A mafia boss's wife should be protected, not trained to fight like some common criminal. Jinwoo pressed the talk button, his voice deadly calm. A mafia boss's wife will be targeted by enemies. She needs to be able to survive until help arrives. Miss Okafor passes the 4th test. But she lost. She didn't quit. There's a difference. After the test, Amarachi sat on a bench in the training room, her muscles aching and her pride bruised. She'd known she wouldn't win, but she'd hoped to at least hold her own longer. A bottle of water appeared in her vision. She looked up to find Jinwoo standing over her, his expression unreadable. You did well. I lost. You survived. His tone made it clear that survival was victory enough. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Where did you learn to fight like that? Lagos isn't always safe. Especially for women living alone. I took self-defense classes, and then I practiced on anyone who thought I was easy prey. Smart. His gaze traveled over her face, lingering on a small cut above her eyebrow that she'd gotten during the scenario. You're hurt. It's nothing. She tried to stand, but he caught her wrist gently. Let me. Before she could protest, he produced a first aid kit from somewhere and began cleaning the cut with surprising tenderness. His fingers were gentle on her skin, and Amarachi found herself frozen, barely breathing, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. You don't have to do this. I want to. Their eyes met, and the air between them turned electric. Amarachi's lips parted, her breath coming faster. Jinwoo's hand stilled against her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone in a caress that felt deliberate. Intimate. She should pull away. Should maintain distance. Should remember that this man was dangerous and powerful and completely out of her league. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for just a moment. Jinwoo made a sound low in his throat, and then his hand was in her hair, tilting her head back. His face was inches from hers, his breath warm against her lips. If I kiss you right now, I won't stop. The warning came out rough, almost desperate. Then don't stop. The words left her mouth before she could think better of him. Jinwoo's control shattered. He kissed her like a man starving, his mouth claiming hers with an intensity that made her gasp. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Heat exploded through her body. Need. Want. Something deeper and more terrifying. He kissed like he did everything else. Completely. Possessively. Like he was claiming her, marking her, making her his. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him, and she went willingly, desperate for more contact, more of everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jinwoo rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything. I know. Are you scared? Amarachi's voice was barely a whisper. Terrified. Good. His hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing her swollen lips. Me too. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Then Jinwoo pulled back reluctantly, his expression torn between desire and duty. You should rest. Tomorrow's test will be difficult. What is it? Politics. You'll need to demonstrate an understanding of the family's business interests and navigate a simulated council meeting. Can you help me prepare? No. The word came out harsh. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I can't show favoritism. Not openly. But you already are. She touched his arm gently. Everyone knows you're protecting me. Keeping me in the competition when I should have been eliminated. That's different. How? Because I can't seem to stop. He looked at her with such raw honesty that her breath caught. You've gotten under my skin, Amarachi. I don't know what to do about it. That night, the other candidates held a secret meeting in one of their rooms. 28 women, their faces tight with resentment and calculation. She has to go. The head judge's niece, a beautiful woman named Min Seo, spoke with cold determination. He's clearly infatuated with her. If we don't act now, she'll win despite failing every traditional test. What do you suggest? We expose her. Show the council that she's manipulating him. Make them see that she's a liability. How? She's done nothing wrong. Minasio's smile was cruel. Then we make her do something wrong. We create a situation she can't escape from. Something that will force him to eliminate her to save face. The plan was set in motion. None of them noticed the guard outside the door, loyal to Jinwoo, already texting his boss about the conspiracy. Jinwoo read the message and felt rage burn through him. They were plotting against her. Against Amarachi. His Amarachi. The possessive thought should have alarmed him. Instead, it felt right. Natural. Inevitable. He called his head of security. Double her protection. I want eyes on her every moment. If anyone tries to hurt her or frame her, I want to know immediately. Yes, sir. Should we inform Miss Okafor of the threat? No. She has enough to worry about. Just keep her safe. He ended the call and stared at his phone, at the security footage pulled up showing Amarachi in her room, sitting on her bed with her phone pressed to her ear, talking to her brother. She was smiling. Laughing. Beautiful and real and completely unaware that she'd walked into a nest of vipers. The next day brought the fifth test. Political acumen. The candidates were placed in a simulated council meeting where they had to navigate complex negotiations between rival factions within the organization. It was designed to test strategic thinking, diplomacy, and the ability to handle pressure. 27 women performed adequately, following safe, predictable strategies. Then came Min SEO, who delivered a brilliant performance, showcasing deep knowledge of the organization's structure and expertly managing the simulated conflicts. The judges were impressed. Finally, Amarachi entered the room. She sat at the head of the table, surrounded by actors playing hostile council members, and took a breath. The scenario began. Immediately, the council members attacked her, questioning her loyalty, her background, her worthiness. She let them talk, her expression calm, her hands folded on the table. Then she spoke. "You're asking the wrong questions." The room went silent. Amarachi continued, her voice steady and clear. "You want to know if I'm loyal to the Park family. But loyalty isn't given freely. It's earned. You want to know if I understand your business. But understanding comes from respect, and you've shown me none. You want to know if I'm worthy to stand beside your boss. But worthiness isn't determined by how well I can perform in simulated scenarios. It's determined by what I'm willing to sacrifice for the people I love." She stood, her presence commanding despite her relative inexperience. "I came here for my brother." "That's true. But I've stayed because I see something in Park Jin-woo that you've all missed. You see a weapon to be wielded. A symbol to be maintained. I see a man who's carrying the weight of an entire organization alone. Who's isolated himself to protect the people around him. Who's forgotten what it means to be human because humanity is weakness in your world." The actors playing council members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't in the script. Amarachi wasn't following the expected pattern. "You want to test my political acumen? Here it is. The greatest threat to the Park family isn't external enemies. It's internal rot. It's a council so focused on tradition and appearance that you've lost sight of what actually matters. Loyalty. Honor. The willingness to evolve." Jin-woo watched from the observation room, his heart pounding. She was magnificent. Fierce. Uncompromising. Speaking truths that needed to be said. The head judge's voice was ice. "This is completely inappropriate. She's insulting the entire organization. Is she wrong?" Jin-woo's question silenced the room. His eyes never left Amarachi as she stood in that conference room, alone and defiant and absolutely right. Is anything she said actually wrong? The judges had no answer. That evening, Min SEO put her plan into action. She approached Amarachi in the garden with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You did well today." Amarachi was immediately suspicious, but she tried to remain polite. "Thank you. I wanted to apologize for how the other candidates have treated you." Min SEO's voice was honey-sweet. "We've been unfair. You're just trying to help your brother. I understand that now." Amarachi's guard didn't drop, but she nodded cautiously. Min SEO continued. "I thought you might like to see something. There's a beautiful gallery on the estate that few people know about. It is artwork from all over the world, including some African pieces. Would you like to see?" Amarachi hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. But the offer seemed genuine, and she was tired of being isolated from the other women. "All right. Thank you." She followed Min SEO through the estate, through corridors she didn't recognize, deeper into areas she'd never explored. Too late, she realized they were moving away from the main buildings, toward the restricted sections where only family and high-ranking organization members were allowed. "This doesn't feel right. We should go back." Amarachi stopped walking. Min SEO's smile turned cruel. "Oh, but we're almost there. Don't you want to see where Jin-woo keeps his most valuable possessions? This is a setup." Amarachi turned to leave, but 3 men in suits blocked her path. She recognized them as part of the organization's security force, but not ones loyal to Jin-woo. Her training kicked in. She dropped into a defensive stance, her mind racing through options. "I'm a competition candidate. You can't touch me without Jin-woo's permission." Min SEO laughed. "We're not going to touch you. We're just going to make sure you're found somewhere you shouldn't be. Somewhere that proves you're a spy. An infiltrator. Someone who needs to be eliminated for the family's safety. Amarachi's blood ran cold. She'd been set up perfectly. Found in a restricted area with no explanation and no witnesses to support her story. Jinwoo would have no choice but to remove her from the competition to save face with the council. She looked at Min Seo with contempt. You're that threatened by me? Threatened? Min Seo's eyes glittered with malice. You're nothing. An outsider who doesn't belong. I'm ensuring the natural order is maintained. Amarachi smiled coldly. Then you've already lost. Because Jinwoo doesn't care about your natural order. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the estate. Security flooded the corridor, led by Jinwoo himself, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes found Amarachi first, scanning her for injuries, and something in his expression softened fractionally when he confirmed she was unharmed. Then he turned that lethal attention on Min Seo and her accomplices. Explain. The word was soft. Deadly. Min Seo's confidence faltered. We found her in a restricted area. We were simply detaining her until. You were setting her up. Jinwoo moved forward, and grown men flinched away from him. I have cameras everywhere. I saw everything. Your pathetic attempt to frame her. Your conspiracy with my own security personnel. Your violation of every code this organization holds sacred. He was close enough now that Min Seo trembled. You tried to hurt what's mine. The possessiveness in those words sent heat through Amarachi's body despite the dangerous situation. Jinwoo continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the corridor with menace. You're eliminated from the competition. Your family's business relationship with the park organization is terminated. And you, he turned to the security men who'd aided Min Seo, you're finished. If I ever see any of you again, it will be the last thing you see. Min Seo tried to maintain her composure. The council won't stand for this. You're choosing an outsider over established families. Then the council can join you in exile. Jinwoo's tone made it clear the discussion was over. Get them out of my sight. Security escorted Min Seo and the others away. The corridor emptied quickly, leaving Jinwoo and Amarachi alone. He turned to her, his expression shifting from cold fury to something warmer. Concerned. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? No. I'm fine. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have seen this coming. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is. He moved closer, his hands hovering near her as if he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he should. Everything that happens to you while you're under my protection is my responsibility. I chose to follow her. I should have been more careful. You were kind. You tried to believe the best in someone who didn't deserve it. His hand finally made contact, cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd just displayed. That's not a flaw, Amarachi. That's who you are. Tears burned in her eyes. She hadn't realized how scared she'd been until the danger passed. Jinwoo's thumb brushed across her cheek, catching a falling tear. Come with me. Not a command this time. A request. She nodded, and he took her hand, leading her through the estate to his private quarters. She'd never been here before. The space was surprisingly simple. Elegant but not ostentatious. Books lined the walls. A desk held scattered papers. It felt lived in. Real. Sit. He guided her to a leather couch and disappeared into another room, returning with a first aid kit and a glass of water. I'm not hurt. Humor me. He knelt before her, checking her hands, her arms, her face for any sign of injury. His touch was gentle, thorough, reverent. When he was satisfied she was unharmed, he sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. I'm pulling you from the competition. Amarachi's head whipped around. What? Why? Because it's not safe. Today proved that. The other candidates see you as a threat, and they're willing to hurt you to eliminate that threat. I won't risk your life for some medieval spectacle my council dreamed up. But my brother. Your brother will get his surgery. I'll pay for it personally. The compensation, everything I promised, it's yours regardless. He turned to face her fully, his expression intense. But I'm done watching you be hurt. Done with tests and competitions and political games. This ends now. What about your council? Your organization? They need you to marry for political stability. Then they'll have to accept my choice. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. If I marry anyone, it will be you. Not because you passed tests or proved yourself worthy by their standards. Because you're the only person who's made me feel human in 17 years. Amarachi's breath caught. Her heart hammered so hard she could barely hear over the rushing in her ears. Jinwoo. I'm in love with you. The confession came out raw, unguarded. I know. It's insane. I know it's too fast. I know you came here for your brother and got caught up in something you never asked for. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't watch you from a distance and tell myself it's just attraction or curiosity or temporary fascination. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You become everything to me, and it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has been taken away. But I'd rather live in fear with you than in safety alone. Amarachi's tears spilled over freely now. I love you too. The words tumbled out in a rush. I tried not to. I told myself you were dangerous and powerful and completely wrong for me. But every time you looked at me like I mattered, every time you defended me, every time you showed me the man beneath the monster everyone else sees, I fell harder. I don't want to leave. I don't want the competition to end. I want you. Jinwoo kissed her then, deep and desperate and claiming. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss turned heated quickly, all the tension and fear and longing of the past weeks exploding between them. He pulled her into his lap, and she went willingly, straddling him, pressing as close as physically possible. His hands roamed her back, her waist, her curves, touching her like he was trying to memorize every inch. She gasped against his mouth when his lips moved to her neck, trailing fire down to her collarbone. Jinwoo. Say my name again. His voice was rough against her skin. Jinwoo. Please. He lifted his head, his eyes dark with desire but also something deeper. More tender. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, I'm never letting you go. I don't want you to let me go. He carried her to his bedroom, kicking the door closed behind them. What followed was passion and tenderness intertwined, two people desperately claiming each other, fear and hope and love expressed through touch and breathless whispers and moments of connection so intense they bordered on spiritual. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Amarachi's head on Jinwoo's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her, the world felt both completely changed and perfectly right. Jinwoo pressed a kiss to her hair. Stay with me tonight. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? She lifted her head to look at him, seeing vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never shown anyone else. I promise. But when dawn broke, Amarachi woke alone. The space beside her was cold. Jinwoo was gone. Panic seized her chest immediately. Had he regretted last night? Had the reality of what they'd done, of what it meant for his organization and his carefully constructed life, made him pull away? She dressed quickly in the clothes from the previous night and slipped out of his private quarters, trying to make it back to her assigned room without being seen. But the estate was already awake, and servants and security personnel saw her disheveled state, her wrinkled clothes, her just-been thoroughly kissed appearance. The whispers started immediately. By the time she reached her room, her phone was buzzing with messages. Her brother. The other candidates. Even the head judge requesting her immediate presence. Her heart sank. This was it. Jinwoo had abandoned her after all. Used her and discarded her like she'd feared from the beginning. How could she have been so stupid? So naive? She should have known better than to trust a man like him. A mafia boss who took what he wanted and moved on without looking back. She showered and changed, her movements mechanical, her heart breaking with each passing moment. When she finally made her way to the formal meeting room where the head judge waited, she held her head high despite the tears threatening to fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. The head judge sat behind a large desk, her expression severe. Miss Okafor. You've been summoned because of serious allegations regarding your conduct last night. Amarachi said nothing. There was nothing to say. You were seen leaving Park Jin-woo's private quarters this morning in a state that suggests, the judge paused delicately, inappropriate intimacy. This is a violation of the competition rules. Candidates are forbidden from pursuing physical relationships with the intended groom until after the competition concludes. I understand. Amarachi's voice was steady despite the pain crushing her chest. I'll withdraw immediately. Actually, a new voice cut through the room, you won't. Jin-woo strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was dressed impeccably in a dark suit, his hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the powerful boss he was. But his eyes, when they found Amarachi, were soft. Warm. Completely at odds with his formal appearance. Sir, you shouldn't be here during disciplinary proceedings. The head judge stood nervously. I'm exactly where I should be. Jin-woo moved to stand beside Amarachi, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture of unmistakable support and possession. Because I'm the one who violated the competition rules, not her. The room went silent. Jin-woo continued, his voice calm but absolute. I pursued Miss Okafor. I invited her to my private quarters. I initiated physical intimacy. If anyone should be punished, it's me. But sir, the competition integrity depends on. The competition is over. Jin-woo's words landed like bombs. I'm ending it effective immediately. All remaining candidates will receive their promised compensation. Their families will maintain their business relationships with our organization. But there will be no more tests. No more politics. He looked down at Amarachi, and his entire demeanor softened. I've made my choice. Amarachi's breath caught. Her heart, which had been breaking moments ago, suddenly felt too full for her chest. Jin-woo turned back to the judge, his tone brooking no argument. Amarachi Okafor will be my wife. Not because she passed your tests or proved herself by your standards. Because she's the only woman I've ever loved. The only person who's seen me as human rather than weapon. The only one brave enough to challenge me and honest enough to show me who she really is. The judge sputtered. But the council. The traditions. The political alliances. Will adapt or be replaced. Jin-woo's voice turned cold. I built this organization into the most powerful force and soul. I've made every family involved wealthier and safer than they've ever been. And I've done it alone, without a wife, without political marriages, through pure strategy and strength. His hand tightened on Amarachi's back. If the council can't accept my choice, they're welcome to try operating without me. We both know how that will end. The threat was clear. Jin-woo was too valuable, too powerful, too essential to their operations. They needed him far more than he needed them. And everyone in that room knew it. The judge sat down slowly, defeat written across her features. As you wish, sir. I'll inform the council of your decision. Do that. Jin-woo's tone gentled slightly. And make it clear that Amarachi is under my personal protection. Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or makes her feel unwelcome answers to me directly. Yes, sir. After the judge left, Jin-woo finally turned his full attention to Amarachi. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you woke up. I had to meet with my council before they heard rumors. I wanted to control the narrative, protect you from their initial reaction. I thought you regretted it. Her voice broke. I thought you'd used me and thrown me away. Never. The word was fierce. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. I could never regret you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I was trying to protect you, but I ended up hurting you instead. I'm sorry. She buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in his scent, letting his warmth chase away the cold fear that had gripped her all morning. What happens now? Now, he pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, we figure this out together. Your brother gets his surgery. You finish your nursing degree if you want. We get married when you're ready, not when the council demands it. His expression turned serious. I know this life isn't what you signed up for. It's dangerous and complicated and full of people who will resent you for being chosen. But I swear to you, Amarachi, I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice by staying. By loving me back. I'm not afraid. She smiled through her tears. Well, I'm terrified, but I'm not running. Good. He kissed her softly. Because I'm never letting you go. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Jinwoo made good on every promise. Amarachi's brother received his surgery from Seoul's best specialist, fully funded with no strings attached. Jinwoo arranged for her brother to stay in a private recovery facility and brought in additional support staff to ensure his comfort. Amarachi enrolled in an accelerated nursing program at Seoul's top university, with Jinwoo quietly funding a new scholarship program for international students. The council grudgingly accepted Jinwoo's choice, though several families withdrew their support in protest. Jinwoo handled each defection with cold efficiency, replacing them with hungrier, more loyal allies who understood that the future of the organization lay in evolution, not stagnation. But not everyone accepted the new reality peacefully. 3 weeks after Jinwoo's announcement, Amarachi was leaving her university class when a black van pulled up beside her. Before she could react, before her security detail could intervene, someone grabbed her from behind and yanked her into the vehicle. A cloth pressed against her face, chemical sweet and suffocating. Her vision blurred. The world tilted. And everything went black. She woke in darkness. Her head pounded. Her hands were bound behind her back. Slowly, her vision adjusted, and she realized she was in some kind of warehouse. Empty. Cold. Abandoned. 3 men stood nearby, speaking in low voices. She recognized one of them. Minasio's father. The family Jinwoo had cut off after Minasio's betrayal. You're awake. Minasio's father approached, his smile cruel. Good. I want you conscious for what comes next. What do you want? Amarachi's voice came out steady despite the fear coursing through her. Revenge. He crouched in front of her. Park Jinwoo destroyed my family. Severed our business relationships. Made us pariahs in Seoul's underworld. All because of you. So I'm going to destroy what he values most. Her blood ran cold, but she kept her expression neutral. Killing me won't give you your power back. It will make Jinwoo hunt you to the ends of the earth. Oh, I'm not going to kill you. His smile widened. I'm going to break you. Hurt you in ways that leave scars Jinwoo will see every time he looks at you. Make you beg. Make you scream. And record every moment. He pulled out a phone, his intentions clear. Then I'll send him the videos and let him know that the woman he chose over his organization is damaged goods. Weak. Worthless. A liability that will haunt him forever. Rage flooded through Amarachi, burning away fear. You're pathetic. The words came out with contempt. You had power handed to you through birth and tradition. Jinwoo built his from nothing. And you're so threatened by a woman who dared to love him that you resort to kidnapping and torture. That's not strength. That's weakness. The slap came hard enough to split her lip. Blood filled her mouth. She spatted at his feet. Minasio's father raised his hand again, but one of his men interrupted nervously. Sir, we should move quickly. Park will be looking for her. Let him look. He won't find this place in time. Minasio's father pulled out a knife, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Let's begin. But before he could move, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Jinwoo entered like an avenging angel, flanked by 20 armed men. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes burned with something primal and terrifying when they found Amarachi. He assessed her in a glance. Bound. Bleeding. Terrified but unbroken. And something inside him snapped. The violence that followed was swift and brutal. Jinwoo moved through Minasio's father's men like death incarnate. He didn't kill them. That would have been mercy. Instead, he broke them systematically, ensuring each man would carry the memory of crossing him in their bones and scars for the rest of their lives. Minacio's father tried to use Amarachi as a shield, pressing his knife to her throat. "One more step and I cut her." Jinwoo stopped. His hands raised in apparent surrender. But his eyes, locked on Amarachi's, were calm. Trusting. She understood immediately. She'd trained for this. When Minacio's father's attention shifted fractionally to Jinwoo, Amarachi moved. She dropped her weight, twisted, and broke his hold using the techniques she'd learned weeks ago in the competition's combat test. The knife clattered to the floor. Jinwoo was there instantly, pulling Amarachi behind him and delivering one brutal punch that sent Minacio's father crashing to the ground. Jinwoo didn't follow up. Instead, he turned all his attention to Amarachi, his hands gentle as they worked to free her bonds. "Are you hurt?" "Did he?" "I'm okay." Her voice shook now that the immediate danger had passed. "Jinwoo, I'm okay." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But she didn't complain. She held him just as fiercely, feeling his heart hammering against her chest, his breath ragged against her hair. "I'm sorry." The words came out broken. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have anticipated this. You found me. That's what matters. But they hurt you. Light touches. Nothing permanent." She pulled back to look at him, seeing anguish in his eyes that matched her own fading fear. "Jinwoo, I'm okay. I survived. Because you're strong." He cupped her face, his thumbs gentle on her cheeks. "Because you're brave and smart and everything I don't deserve." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I thought I'd lost you. When my security called and said you'd been taken, when I realized someone had you and was hurting you, he couldn't finish." His control was cracking. All his careful walls crumbling. "Never again." Amarachi pressed her forehead to his. "Never again." Behind them, Jinwoo's men had restrained Minacio's father and his accomplices. Jinwoo's second-in-command approached cautiously. "Sir, what do you want done with them?" Jinwoo's expression went cold again. He turned to look at the men who dared to touch what was his. "Turn them over to the authorities. Every crime documented. Every piece of evidence preserved. They'll spend the rest of their lives in prison." "But sir, wouldn't it be cleaner too?" "No." Jinwoo's voice was absolute. "I'm done solving problems with violence." He looked at Amarachi, and his expression softened. "I'm done being the monster everyone expects. If I'm going to build a life with her, I need to become someone worthy of her. Someone who chooses justice over revenge. Even when revenge would feel better." The drive back to the estate was quiet. Jinwoo held Amarachi's hand the entire time, his thumb stroking across her knuckles in a soothing rhythm. She leaned against his shoulder, exhausted and aching but safe. When they arrived, Jinwoo carried her inside despite her protests, taking her directly to his private quarters. He drew a bath, helped her undress with clinical gentleness, and supported her as she sank into the warm water. Then he sat beside the tub, still fully dressed, and just watched her with eyes that held 1,000 apologies. "You don't have to stay." "I want to. I need to." He reached out and tucked a stray braid behind her ear. "I need to see that you're okay. That you're here. That I didn't lose you. You didn't lose me." She caught his hand, bringing it to her lips. "I'm right here." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "Marry me." Amarachi's breath caught. "What?" "Not when you're ready. Not when the council approves. Now. Marry me now because I can't stand another day of you not being officially, legally, permanently mine." His voice roughened with emotion. "I want the world to know you're under my protection. I want every piece of paper and law and tradition binding us together so completely that no one can ever question your place beside me." "That's not very romantic." She tried to joke, but tears were streaming down her face. "I don't care about romance." His grip tightened on her hand. I care about keeping you safe. About making sure everyone knows that harming you means declaring war on me and everything I control. About waking up every morning with legal proof that you chose me. That I get to keep you. Then yes. Her smile was tremulous but real. Yes, I'll marry you. Now. Tomorrow. Whenever you want. Tomorrow. The word came out fierce, determined. I'll make the arrangements tonight. We'll do it quietly with just your brother and my most trusted people. Then we'll have a bigger ceremony later if you want, but tomorrow, you become my wife. She laughed through her tears. You're insane. Completely. He leaned forward, kissing her softly despite the fact that she was naked in the bath and he was still fully clothed. But you love me anyway. I do. God help me, I really do. The wedding took place the next evening in Jinwoo's private garden. Just as he'd promised. Simple. Intimate. Perfect. Amarachi wore a dress Jinwoo had somehow acquired overnight, white silk with gold embroidery that honored both Korean and Nigerian traditions. Her brother attended, still in a wheelchair but healing, tears streaming down his face as he watched his sister marry the man who'd saved both their lives. Jinwoo wore a traditional Korean hanbok in black and gold, and when he saw Amarachi walking toward him, his composure cracked completely. Tears gleamed in his eyes. His hand shook as he reached for hers. You're beautiful. You're crying. So are you. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Amarachi promised to stand beside him through darkness and light, to challenge him when he was wrong and support him when he was right, to love him completely despite and because of everything he was. Jinwoo promised to protect her with his life, to honor her strength and nurture her dreams, to spend every day becoming the man she deserved, to choose love over fear even when fear was easier. When the officiant pronounced them married, Jinwoo kissed her like a man claiming his salvation. Deep. Thorough. A promise and a plea and a victory all at once. That night, in the privacy of their shared room, he worshipped her body with a tenderness that made her cry. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss was a prayer. Every whispered word was a vow renewed. You're mine now. He breathed against her skin. Legally. Completely. Forever. And you're mine. She arched into his touch, her hands mapping the planes of his back, the scars he carried from a violent life. Forever. What followed was passion and promise intertwined. Two people claiming each other. Binding themselves together through physical connection and emotional surrender. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Amarachi pressed against Jinwoo's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her, everything felt settled. Right. Like all the chaos and fear and uncertainty had been leading to exactly this moment. I love you. She whispered into the darkness. I love you more. His response was immediate. Absolute. Impossible, but I appreciate the effort. The following months brought massive changes to the park organization. Jinwoo kept his promise to evolve. He systematically transitioned the family's operations from criminal enterprises to legitimate businesses, using his strategic brilliance to invest in technology, real estate, and international trade. It wasn't easy. Several families fought the changes. A few attempted coups. Jinwoo handled each challenge with the same cold efficiency he'd always employed, but now tempered with a new consideration. He asked himself before every decision how Amarachi would view his actions. Whether she'd be proud or disappointed. Whether he was becoming the man she believed he could be. Amarachi thrived in her new life. She completed her nursing degree and immediately began working at a clinic that served Seoul's underprivileged populations. Many of them were immigrants like herself, people struggling to navigate a new country and a sometimes hostile culture. She became their advocate, their bridge to better healthcare and better lives. Jinwoo supported her completely, funding the clinic's expansion and ensuring she had security that didn't interfere with her work. He showed up sometimes, unannounced, just to watch her through the clinic windows as she cared for patients. Seeing her smile. Seeing her make a difference. Seeing her be exactly who she was meant to be. One evening, 6 months after their wedding, Amarachi came home to find Jinwoo waiting in their bedroom with an expression she couldn't quite read. Nervous. Hopeful. Vulnerable. What's wrong? She crossed to him immediately, her nursing instincts assessing him for signs of illness or injury. Nothing's wrong. He caught her hands, pulling her between his knees as he sat on the edge of their bed. I have something for you. He produced a folder from the nightstand. Legal documents. She opened it, her eyes scanning the pages, and her breath caught. Adoption papers. For her brother. Making him legally Jinwoo's family. Giving him the park name and all the protection and resources that came with it. Your brother is important to you. Jinwoo's voice was quiet. He's the reason you entered the competition. The reason you endured humiliation and fear and everything else. I want him to know he's part of our family now. That he doesn't have to worry about medical bills or his future or anything. That he's protected. Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't speak. Could only throw her arms around Jinwoo's neck and hold him while emotions overwhelmed her. He held her back, his hands gentle on her back, his face buried in her hair. Is that yes? That's yes. Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. That's yes to everything. Always yes with you. A few weeks later, Amarachi woke feeling nauseous. She barely made it to the bathroom before being sick. Jinwoo was there immediately, holding her hair back, his hand rubbing soothing circles on her back. Something you ate? Maybe. She rinsed her mouth, her mind already calculating. This was the third morning in a row. Or maybe something else. She met his eyes in the mirror and watched as understanding dawned. His expression transformed. Joy. Wonder. Fear. All at once. Are you? I don't know yet. But maybe. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Should we? I have tests at the clinic. I'll check today. That afternoon, with Jinwoo pacing nervously in the waiting room, Amarachi took 3 pregnancy tests. All positive. She stood in the clinic bathroom, staring at those 2 pink lines, and felt her world expand. A baby. Their baby. The product of a love that had started in competition and chaos and had somehow become the most real thing in her life. She found Jinwoo in the waiting room. He stood immediately when he saw her, his eyes searching her face frantically. Well? We're pregnant. For a moment, he just stared. Then his face crumpled with emotion. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, holding her like she was something precious and fragile and infinitely valuable. We're having a baby. He repeated, his voice breaking. We're having a baby. The pregnancy announcement sent shockwaves through both their families and the organization. Jinwoo's council, already dealing with his dramatic reforms, now had to accept that the next generation of Park family leadership would be half Nigerian. Some adapted. Others didn't. Jinwoo made it clear that anyone who couldn't accept his child would no longer be part of the organization. Amarachi's brother was overjoyed. He'd been living with them since his adoption, going to physical therapy and preparing to attend university. He immediately declared himself the baby's favorite uncle and began learning everything he could about childcare. Jinwoo became impossibly protective during the pregnancy. He wanted Amarachi to stop working. She refused. He wanted her to have a full-time medical staff. She agreed to regular checkups and prenatal care but insisted on maintaining her independence. They compromised. She continued her clinic work but with increased security and a modified schedule. He relaxed fractionally but still showed up randomly to check on her, bringing her favorite foods and making sure she was resting enough. Their friends joked that Seoul's most feared Mafia boss had been domesticated by pregnancy cravings and nursery decoration debates. 7 months into her pregnancy, Amarachi waddled into their bedroom late one evening to find Jinwoo sitting on the floor, surrounded by instruction manuals and baby furniture pieces, looking completely defeated. This crib is mocking me. She couldn't help but laugh. The most powerful man in Seoul, brought down by Swedish furniture. I've negotiated multi-million-dollar deals. I've outmaneuvered experienced criminals. I cannot figure out how part A connects to part B. Let me see. She lowered herself carefully to the floor beside him, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. Together, they eventually assembled the crib, though it took twice as long as it should have because they kept getting distracted. Jingwoo would stop to kiss her. To place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick. To whisper promises to their unborn child about the world they were building. You're going to be an amazing father. Amarachi said softly, watching him run his hand reverently over the assembled crib. I hope so. Vulnerability shone in his eyes. I never had good examples. My father was powerful but distant. He taught me strategy and ruthlessness but not love. How do I give our child what I never received? You start by being here. She took his hand, placing it on her belly where the baby was currently practicing what felt like martial arts. By choosing to be present and gentle and honest. By letting yourself love openly instead of hiding behind walls. You've already learned how to do that with me. You'll figure it out with our baby too. The baby arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning. Amarachi's water broke while she was at the clinic. Jingwoo received the call and abandoned an important meeting mid-sentence, racing across Seoul with his entire security detail in tow. He burst into the hospital looking wild-eyed and terrified, demanding to know where his wife was and whether she was okay. The nurses directed him to the delivery room where Amarachi was already in active labor. The next 6 hours were the longest of Jingwoo's life. He held Amarachi's hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement when she was exhausted, let her squeeze his fingers hard enough to bruise, and felt completely helpless. This was a battle he couldn't fight for her. A pain he couldn't take away. All he could do was be present. Be there. Be the anchor she needed. Finally, after what felt like forever, their daughter entered the world. Small. Perfect. Screaming with indignation at being evicted from her warm home. The doctor placed her on Amarachi's chest, and both parents started crying. She's beautiful. Jingwoo's voice was reverent as he looked at his daughter. Perfect. Just like her mother. They named her Naima. It meant blessing in Arabic, peaceful in Swahili, and felt right for a child born from chaos and love in equal measure. Jingwoo held his daughter for the first time with shaking hands, terrified he would drop her or hurt her somehow. She was so small. So fragile. So completely dependent on him. And he loved her with an intensity that stole his breath. This tiny person was half him, half Amarachi. The product of love that had started impossibly and had become the foundation of everything he was. I promise you. He whispered to Naima as she slept in his arms. I promise I'll be better than my father. I'll be present. I'll teach you that strength includes kindness. I'll show you that power should be used to protect, not dominate. I'll make sure you grow up knowing you're loved. That you're safe. That you can be anything you want because you have parents who will move heaven and earth to support you. Amarachi watched from the hospital bed, her heart so full it ached. This was everything she'd never known she wanted. A family. A home. A love that had started in competition and had become unshakable. 2 weeks after bringing Naima home, Jingwoo called a final meeting with his council. Amarachi sat beside him, their daughter in her arms, as he addressed the men who'd once controlled his life and now served his vision. I'm announcing my retirement from active leadership. The room erupted. Jingwoo raised his hand for silence. I've spent 17 years building this organization. Making it powerful. Making it feared. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but my priorities have changed. His hand found Amarachi's, their fingers interlacing. My family comes first now. My wife's work. My daughter's future. Creating something beyond criminal empire. His expression was firm, unyielding. I'm transitioning full control to my second-in-command. The organization will continue. The businesses will thrive. But I'm stepping back to focus on what actually matters. One of the older council members stood. You're abandoning everything your father built. No. Jingwoo's voice was calm. I'm choosing to build something different. Something better. My father created an empire through fear and violence. I'm leaving behind legitimate businesses, stable leadership, and a model for how power can evolve. That's a better legacy than anything he imagined. But what about honor? What about tradition? What about everything we've sacrificed for this organization? I'm not dishonoring tradition. I'm creating new traditions. Jinwoo stood, his presence still commanding despite his words about retirement. I'm showing that strength includes knowing when to step back. That power includes choosing peace. That honor means keeping promises to the people you love even when it costs you everything else. He looked around the table at men who'd followed him for years. I hope you understand. But even if you don't, my decision is final. The meeting ended with mixed reactions. Some council members respected his choice. Others felt betrayed. A few plotted to undermine him. Jinwoo handled each challenge calmly, systematically, ensuring that his exit from leadership didn't destabilize the organization. Within 3 months, the transition was complete. Within 6 months, the organization was thriving under new leadership. And Jinwoo was free. Free to be a husband. A father. A man who'd chosen love over power and never regretted it. 1 year after Naima's birth, Jinwoo and Amarachi renewed their vows. This time, the ceremony was large. Public. A celebration that brought together both their worlds. Nigerian family members flew in from Lagos. Korean business associates attended despite initial reservations. The ceremony blended traditions beautifully, honoring both cultures equally. Amarachi wore a dress that incorporated both white lace and African print. Jinwoo wore traditional Korean hanbok with Nigerian patterns embroidered along the edges. They exchanged vows again, this time in front of hundreds of witnesses, and the words were even more powerful than before. I love you. Jinwoo said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. You saved me from a life of isolation and violence. You showed me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. You gave me a family when I thought I didn't deserve one. Every day with you is a gift I never expected and will never take for granted. I love you. Amarachi responded, tears streaming down her face. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You valued me when I was being judged and found wanting. You protected me when I was vulnerable and empowered me when I was strong. You became the partner I never knew I needed and the love I always hoped existed. They kissed to thunderous applause. Their daughter, now walking and babbling, clapped her tiny hands enthusiastically from her uncle's arms. The reception was joy incarnate. Dancing that mixed Korean and African styles. Food that celebrated both cultures. Speeches from people whose lives had been changed by Jinwoo's transformation or Amarachi's compassion. Jinwoo's former second-in-command, now the organization's leader, raised a toast. To the man who taught us that evolution isn't weakness. To the woman who showed us that love isn't liability. To a partnership that changed everything we thought we knew about power and family and legacy. May we all be brave enough to choose love over fear. Later, as the party wound down, Jinwoo and Amarachi stood on a balcony overlooking the celebration. Naima was asleep against Jinwoo's shoulder, her tiny hand fisted in his jacket. Do you ever regret it? Amarachi asked softly. Leaving the organization? Walking away from power? Never. His answer was immediate. Absolute. This is power. He adjusted Naima gently. This is everything. 2 years later, Amarachi stood in the bathroom of their home, staring at another positive pregnancy test. Baby number 2. She found Jinwoo in his study, working on his latest project, a foundation that provided education and resources to immigrant communities throughout Korea. He looked up when she entered, his smile immediate and warm. What's up? We're pregnant again. For a moment, he just stared. Then he was across the room, pulling her into his arms, lifting her off her feet despite her laughing protests. Again? Already? Naima's only 2. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm going to have 2 kids. The wonder in his voice made her heart swell. Two tiny humans who depend on me and love me and will probably drive me crazy. Can't wait. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other, contemplating their growing family. Jinwoo pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Thank you. For what? For entering that competition. For being brave enough to fail every test. For choosing me despite every reason not to. For giving me a life I never imagined I could have. She cupped his face, her thumbs brushing across his cheekbones. Thank you for seeing me. For protecting me. For becoming the man I always knew you could be. For loving me enough to change everything. Their second child, a son they named Kian, arrived on schedule this time. Healthy. Perfect. Loud. Naima was fascinated by her baby brother, insisting on helping with everything despite being barely 3 years old. Jinwoo adapted to 2 children with the same strategic brilliance he'd once applied to criminal enterprises. Schedules. Systems. Tag teaming with Amarachi when one parent was overwhelmed. Learning that perfection wasn't possible but presence was everything. Amarachi continued her clinic work, now expanded to include 3 locations throughout Seoul. Jinwoo's foundation grew, partnering with her clinics to provide comprehensive support for immigrant families. They built something together. Not an empire of fear but a legacy of compassion. 5 years after that. First competition, Amarachi stood in the same ballroom where she'd first walked in traditional dress and failed the elegance test. But everything was different now. The space had been transformed into a gala for the Park Foundation's annual fundraiser. 500 guests filled the room, but this time they were celebrating progress, not judging worthiness. Jinwoo stood at the front of the room, commanding attention without trying, his presence still magnetic but tempered now with warmth. He was introducing Amarachi as the keynote speaker, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. My wife has accomplished more in 5 years than most people manage in a lifetime. She's built a healthcare network that serves thousands. She's advocated for policy changes that protect vulnerable populations. She's raised our 2 beautiful children while somehow finding time to complete her master's degree. His eyes found hers across the room, and the love there was so intense it took her breath away even after all this time. But more than any of that, she taught me what real strength looks like. Not domination or control. But compassion. Courage. The willingness to be vulnerable and demand better from yourself and the world around you. Amarachi took the stage to thunderous applause, her hand briefly squeezing Jinwoo's as she passed him. She wore a dress that honored both her cultures, Nigerian print with Korean-inspired silhouette, her natural hair styled in elegant twists. She looked out at the crowd and saw faces from every part of her journey. Her brother, now graduated from university and working as an engineer. Former competition candidates who'd become genuine friends once politics were removed. Jinwoo's reformed council members who'd chosen evolution over tradition. Medical professionals she'd trained. Families she'd helped. And in the front row, Jinwoo holding their sleeping son while Naima sat on his lap, swinging her legs and beaming at her mother. 5 years ago, I entered a bride competition desperate to save my brother's life. Amarachi's voice carried clearly through the space. I failed every traditional test. I was too different. Too outspoken. Too unwilling to conform. And I thought that made me wrong. That I needed to change who I was to be worthy of belonging. But someone saw those failures differently. She looked at Jinwoo, and he smiled, that soft private smile he reserved only for her. Someone saw authenticity instead of defiance. Strength instead of stubbornness. Possibility instead of problems. And he didn't just accept me as I was. He chose to become someone worthy of being chosen back. The story of how we fell in love isn't a fairy tale. It's complicated and messy and built on a foundation of vulnerability that terrified us both. But it's real. And it taught me that the most radical thing you can do in a world that demands conformity is to be unapologetically yourself. To fail tests that measure the wrong things. To refuse to diminish your light to make others comfortable. To demand that love be partnership, not performance. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. This foundation exists because Jin Woo and I believe that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to have access to the resources they need to not just survive but thrive. We're not trying to save anyone. We're trying to create systems where people can save themselves. Where being different isn't a disadvantage but an asset. Where failure by someone else's standards can be the first step toward defining your own success. The applause was deafening. But Amarachi only had eyes for Jin Woo, who was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Like she was still the most remarkable thing he'd ever witnessed. After the gala, they drove home through Seoul's glittering streets, both children asleep in the back seat. Jin Woo reached across the console to take Amarachi's hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her palm. That was an incredible speech. You were crying. He laughed softly, not denying it. You have that effect on me. Making the most feared man in Seoul cry in public? She teased gently. I'm losing my reputation. You have a new reputation now. Devoted husband. Amazing father. Philanthropist. How boring. Sounds perfect. They pulled up to their home, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. Not the imposing estate where their story began, but something warmer. More theirs. They carried their sleeping children inside, moving with the practiced efficiency of parents who'd done this dance many times. After tucking both kids into bed, they found themselves in their own room, the door closed, the house quiet except for the distant sound of Naima's white noise machine. Jin Woo pulled Amarachi into his arms, swaying slightly even though no music played. What are you thinking about? She asked, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. How different my life would be if you hadn't entered that competition. If you'd failed one more test and given up. I almost did. She admitted. After the second test, when they rejected my cooking without even tasting it, I was ready to leave. Take the compensation I'd earned and go. What stopped you? You. She pulled back to look at him. I caught you watching me through the observation window. You looked angry, but not at me. At them. At the unfairness. And I thought maybe, just maybe, there was one person in that entire place who saw me as human. That one moment of being seen was enough to make me stay. I'm glad you stayed. His hand came up to cup her face, his touch as gentle as always. I'm glad you fought through every failure and every humiliation. I'm glad you were brave enough to be yourself even when it cost you everything. I'm glad you chose me even when I didn't deserve it. You deserved it. She stretched up to kiss him softly. You just didn't know it yet. They made love that night with the ease of long familiarity but the passion of people still discovering each other. Every touch was both practiced and new. Every kiss was both comfort and excitement. And when they finally lay tangled together afterward, Amarachi pressed against Jin Woo's side with his arm around her shoulders, everything felt exactly as it should. I love our life. She whispered into the darkness. This house. Our kids. The work we do. All of it. So do I. His voice was soft with contentment. Though I never imagined it could be like this. What did you imagine? Honestly? Loneliness. He was quiet for a moment. I thought I'd spend my life alone. Powerful but isolated. Feared but not loved. I thought that was the price of the empire I was building. You gave me something better. She kissed his chest, right over his heart. We gave each other something better. Fair correction. His hand stroked through her hair, soothing and possessive at once. Should we tell them? Tell who what? The kids. About how we met. Naima's been asking questions about why we don't have wedding photos with all my family. Amarachi laughed softly. She's 3. I think the bride competition explanation might be a bit advanced. True. Maybe we wait until she's older. When she can appreciate that her mother failed every test and won anyway. I didn't fail. She sat up slightly to look at him, her expression mock offended. I was simply graded on the wrong criteria. Exactly. He pulled her back down, kissing her thoroughly. You failed at being what they wanted and succeeded at being exactly what I needed. That's why I love you. There are many reasons I love you. She settled back against him, yawning. But that's definitely one of them. 6 months later, Amarachi discovered she was pregnant again. Surprise baby number 3. She told Jinwoo over breakfast while Naima drew pictures and Kian attempted to eat his cereal with his hands. Jinwoo froze mid-sip of coffee. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Finally, he managed to speak. 3? 3. Are you okay with 3? Am I? He set down his coffee and came around the table, pulling her into his arms despite their children's confused stares. I'm okay with anything that involves you and more tiny humans who look like you and drive me crazy with love. So yes. Very okay with 3. Naima looked up from her drawing. Are we getting another baby? Looks like it, princess. Jinwoo ruffled her hair affectionately. Can it be a girl? I already have a brother. Naima wrinkled her nose. We'll see what happens. Amarachi laughed. Nature decides these things, not us. The pregnancy was harder this time. Amarachi was older, busier, chasing 2 young children while trying to maintain her clinic work. Jinwoo stepped up completely. He took over more childcare responsibilities. Hired additional staff to help with the foundation work. Made sure Amarachi rested even when she protested. He was attentive to the point of being overprotective, and she loved him for it even when it drove her crazy. You need to let me do things. She complained one evening when he'd insisted on carrying groceries that she was perfectly capable of handling. You're 7 months pregnant with our 3rd child. I need to do nothing. He set the groceries down and turned to face her, his expression serious. Humor me. Let me take care of you. Why? Because, his voice dropped to something raw and honest, I remember what it felt like to almost lose you. When you were kidnapped. When I thought I might never see you again. I can't go through that fear again, Amarachi. So if being overprotective means you're annoyed but safe, I'll take annoyed every time. Her irritation melted immediately. She moved into his space, wrapping her arms around him as best she could with her pregnant belly between them. I'm not going anywhere. I know. But I'm still going to carry the groceries. She laughed against his chest, feeling his tension ease. Fine. Carry the groceries. But I'm still capable of living my life. Deal. Their 3rd child, another girl they named Zara, arrived healthy and screaming. Naima was thrilled to have a sister. Kian was confused about why the new baby didn't do anything interesting. Jinwoo was completely overwhelmed by having 3 children under 5 and wondered how they'd ever managed with only 2. But they figured it out. They always did. Amarachi took extended maternity leave this time, focusing on bonding with Zara and spending time with all 3 children. Jinwoo worked from home as much as possible, his office now filled with toys and children's books alongside business documents. They were exhausted constantly. Their house was chaotic. Their schedules were impossible. And they'd never been happier. One evening, when Zara was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Jinwoo and Amarachi found themselves alone on their bedroom balcony. The children were all asleep. The house was quiet. Seoul glittered in the distance. 3 kids. Amarachi shook her head in wonder. How did we get here? Well, when 2 people love each other very much. She elbowed him gently, cutting off the joke. You know what I mean. From that competition to this. From strangers to this family. From everything we were to everything we are. I know. He pulled her back against his chest, his arms wrapping around her, his chin resting on top of her head. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. That you chose me. That we built this. She covered his arms with hers, leaning into his warmth. Do you ever miss it? The old life? The power? Controlling everything? Never. The answer was immediate. This is better. This chaos. This love. This completely unpredictable beautiful mess of a life. I wouldn't trade a single moment of it for all the power in the world. Good answer. I mean it. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You gave me something I didn't know existed. A home. Not just a house or a family, but that feeling of belonging. Of being seen completely and loved anyway. You gave me purpose beyond survival. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines. You taught me that strength includes softness. That power should serve love, not the other way around. They kissed slowly, sweetly, a reaffirmation of everything they'd built together. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Should we be done? Jinwoo asked suddenly. 3 kids is a lot. Are we tempting fate by even considering more? Are you asking if I want more children? Amarachi raised an eyebrow. I'm asking if your body needs a break. If our family is complete. Or if there's room for one more adventure. She thought about it seriously. Their family felt full. Complete. 3 children was chaos already. Adding a 4th would be insanity. But. She smiled. Ask me again in a year. We'll see how we feel when Zara's not a baby anymore and we can actually sleep through the night consistently. Fair. He kissed her forehead. No pressure either way. I'm happy with our 3 miracles. So am I. But I learned a long time ago that the best things in life are the ones you never planned for. Like a bride competition that changed everything. Exactly like that. 8 years after that first competition, the Park family attended a ceremony at Seoul City Hall. Jinwoo's foundation was receiving an award for its work supporting immigrant communities and healthcare access. The entire family dressed up for the occasion. Naima, now 8, wore a dress she'd picked out herself, combining Korean and Nigerian patterns. Kian, age 6, wore a suit and tie and only complained twice about being uncomfortable. Zara, age 3, wore a princess dress because she was in a phase where everything had to be princess-themed. And Amarachi, now pregnant with their 4th and final child, wore a flowing dress that accommodated her belly while still making her feel beautiful. Jinwoo wore a traditional Korean suit and couldn't stop staring at his family with obvious pride and love. As they accepted the award together, Jinwoo at the microphone with Amarachi beside him and their children sitting in the front row trying to behave, he looked out at the assembled crowd and spoke from the heart. 8 years ago, I was a different person. I valued power over people. Control over connection. I built an empire but was destroying myself in the process. He looked at Amarachi, and his entire expression softened. Then someone walked into my life and failed every test I set for her. She was supposed to be eliminated immediately. Instead, she showed me what real strength looks like. She taught me that the greatest power isn't controlling others but empowering them. That true success isn't accumulation but contribution. That love isn't weakness but the foundation of everything worth building. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. This foundation exists because one woman was brave enough to fail publicly, to be herself unapologetically, to demand that I become someone worthy of her love. Every family we help, every life we change, every policy we influence, it all traces back to that moment when I chose to see failure differently. When I chose to value authenticity over performance. The crowd applauded. But Jinwoo's eyes were only on his wife and children. His real empire. His actual legacy. After the ceremony, as they walked to their car with children in various states of excitement and exhaustion, Naima tugged on Jinwoo's sleeve. Daddy, why do people always talk about mommy failing tests? I thought failing was bad. Jinwoo crouched down to his daughter's eye level, his expression serious. That's an excellent question, princess. Failing can be bad if you're failing at something important. But mommy failed at tests that were measuring the wrong things. They wanted her to be someone she wasn't. And by failing those tests, she succeeded at being exactly who she was meant to be. So failing was actually good? Sometimes. When you fail by being true to yourself, that's not really failing at all. That's winning in a different way. Naima thought about this seriously. Then I'm going to fail at things too if they want me to be someone I'm not. That's my girl. He kissed her forehead. Be yourself always. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Amarachi watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. This was what mattered. Not awards or recognition or public validation. These quiet moments. This family. This love that had started impossibly and had become unshakable. That night, after all three children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Jinwoo and Amarachi sat in their living room. She was going through baby names for their fourth child. He was pretending to read business documents but actually just watching her. You're staring. She said without looking up. I'm appreciating. Smooth. She smiled, setting aside her notebook. What are you appreciating exactly? Everything. The way you wrinkle your nose when you're concentrating. The way you automatically rest your hand on your belly when you're thinking. The way you've taken every challenge life threw at us and turned it into something beautiful. Okay, you're definitely buttering me up for something. She turned to face him fully. What do you want? Nothing. I have everything I could possibly want right here. You're being sappy. I'm being honest. He moved to sit beside her on the couch, his hand joining hers on her pregnant belly. Do you remember what you said to me during the political acumen test? That your greatest threat was internal rot? That we'd lost sight of what actually mattered? I remember the judges hating it. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I'd ever met. That you were willing to tell me truths I needed to hear even when it cost you everything. His thumb traced circles on her belly. You've been doing that for 8 years now. Challenging me. Pushing me to be better. Keeping me honest. That's what partners do. Exactly. And I want you to know that every day I choose you. Choose this. Choose us. It's not obligation or habit or just staying together for the kids. It's active choice to keep building this life with you. She kissed him softly, her hand coming up to cup his face. I choose you too. Every single day. Even when you're overprotective and annoying? Especially then. Because it means you care. That you're still fighting for us even when there's nothing to fight against. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, feeling their baby move between them. Outside, Seoul lived and breathed and continued its endless rhythm. But inside their home, in this moment, everything was perfect. Complete. Exactly as it should be. Their fourth child, a son they named Kofi, arrived on schedule. Healthy. Perfect. The final piece of their family puzzle. Jinwoo held him in the hospital room, surrounded by his wife and 3 other children, and felt something settle in his chest. This was it. This was everything. His empire wasn't built on fear or control. It was built on love and choice and the daily decision to show up for the people who mattered most. Naima leaned against his arm, peering at her new brother. He's so small. You were even smaller. Jinwoo smiled at her. And now look at you. All grown up. I'm 8, Daddy. That's not grown up. To me it is. You're growing up too fast. All of you. He looked at his children, really looked, and marveled at the humans they were becoming. Strong. Kind. Comfortable with their mixed heritage. Confident in their parents' love. This was his legacy. Not territory or power or wealth. These 4 people who would carry forward the lessons he and Amarachi were teaching them every day. Later, when the children had gone home with their uncle and it was just Jinwoo and Amarachi and baby Kofi in the quiet hospital room, they allowed themselves to simply be. Exhausted new parents again. Overwhelmed by how full their lives had become. Grateful beyond words for everything they'd built together. We did it. Amarachi whispered, watching Kofi sleep in the bassinet beside her bed. For healthy kids. A foundation that's changing lives. A marriage that somehow survived chaos and danger and 3, now 4, tiny dictators. We did it. He kissed her temple, his arm around her shoulders. Best failure of my life. Best failure of mine too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their newest child sleep, and thought about the impossible journey that had brought them here. From a bride competition designed to eliminate her to a love story that had transformed everything they touched. From strangers following other people's scripts to partners writing their own story. From failure by traditional standards to success by the only standard that mattered. Their own. 10 years after that first competition, the Park family threw a massive party. It was technically celebrating the foundation's 10th anniversary, but really it was celebrating everything they'd built together. The guest list was enormous. Family from Nigeria and Korea. Friends from every phase of their journey. Medical professionals from Amarachi's clinics. Former organization members who'd successfully transitioned to legitimate businesses. Families they'd helped through the foundation. Children from Naima school. It was beautiful chaos. The party took place in the same ballroom where the competition had been held. Full circle. But this time, the space was filled with joy instead of judgment. Laughter instead of performance. Real connection instead of political maneuvering. Jingwoo stood on the stage, his 4 children lined up beside him, and looked out at the assembled crowd. His voice was strong and clear. 10 years ago, my wife walked into this room and failed the first test of a bride competition. She was wearing traditional Nigerian dress when she was supposed to wear Korean formal wear. She was authentically herself when she was supposed to perform. And I fell in love with her in that moment, though I didn't recognize it yet. The crowd laughed affectionately. Many of them knew this story already, but they never tired of hearing it. Over the next weeks, she failed every single traditional test. Elegance. Household management. Diplomacy. Political acumen. By every measure the competition judges used, she was completely unsuitable. He looked at Amarachi, standing in the front row with baby Kofi in her arms, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And by every measure that actually mattered, she was perfect. She showed me that failure by someone else's standards is often success by your own. That being true to yourself is worth more than any approval. That love isn't about finding someone perfect but finding someone real and choosing them anyway. His children were fidgeting now, Zara tugging on his sleeve and whispering loudly about when they could have cake. He smiled and ruffled her hair. This foundation exists because one woman failed beautifully. Because she taught me that the greatest power is lifting others up. That real legacy isn't what you accumulate but what you give away. That family isn't defined by blood or tradition but by who shows up, who stays, who chooses love over fear. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. So thank you, Amarachi, for failing every test. For being stubbornly, impossibly yourself. For loving me when I didn't deserve it and challenging me to become someone who did. For giving me 4 incredible children and showing me what home actually means. Everything good in my life traces back to the moment you walked into this room and refused to be anyone but yourself. The applause was thunderous. Amarachi was crying openly now, not bothering to hide her tears. Jingwoo descended from the stage and went directly to her, kissing her in front of everyone, their children making exaggerated gagging sounds but smiling anyway. The party continued late into the night. Music and dancing and stories shared. Jingwoo and Amarachi danced together while their children ran wild with other kids, finally free from formal behavior expectations. As they swayed to slow music, Amarachi rested her head on Jingwoo's shoulder and sighed contentedly. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Same. His arms tightened around her. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. That we went from that competition to this life. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd quit after failing the second test? Every day. But then I remember that we were inevitable. Some part of me recognized some part of you from that first moment. We would have found each other somehow. That's romantic nonsense. Maybe. But I choose to believe it anyway. Because the alternative, a world where we missed each other, where I stayed isolated and you stayed struggling, is unbearable to imagine. They danced in silence for a moment. Then Amarachi spoke softly. I'm glad I failed. I'm glad I was too stubborn to quit. I'm glad you saw something in me that no one else did. And I'm so grateful we built this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life together. Me too. He kissed her hair. Best failure either of us ever had. Their children interrupted then, Naima pulling on both their hands and insisting it was family dance time. They spent the next song surrounded by their 4 kids, everyone spinning and laughing and completely off rhythm. It was messy and loud and utterly perfect. Later, long after the party ended and the children were exhausted and sleeping, Jinwoo and Amarachi stood on their balcony at home, looking out at Seoul's nighttime lights. The city where they'd found each other. Where they'd built everything that mattered. We should probably sleep. Amarachi yawned, leaning against his chest. Kofi will be up in a few hours. Probably. But Jinwoo made no move to go inside. I just want to stay here a minute longer. With you. Appreciating what we have. She turned in his arms to face him, her hands resting on his chest. What brought this on? Gratitude. The knowledge that everything could have gone differently. That I could have eliminated you after the first test. That you could have quit. That we could have missed each other completely. But we didn't. No. We didn't. And now we have this. This family. This love. This life that started with failure and became everything. He cupped her face gently. I love you, Amarachi Park. From that first day to this moment to every day forward. I love you too. She stretched up to kiss him. My impossible, wonderful, perfect failure of a husband. They finally went inside, checked on all 4 sleeping children, and fell into bed exhausted. As Amarachi drifted off to sleep, tucked securely against Jinwoo's side with his arm around her, she thought about that scared woman who'd walked into a bride competition desperate to save her brother. She thought she was sacrificing her dignity for money. But instead, she'd found everything she never knew she needed. A partner who saw her completely. A love that transformed them both. A family built on choice and courage. And a life that proved failure by someone else's standards could be the greatest success of all. In the darkness, Jinwoo whispered one final thing, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. Thank you for failing, my love. Thank you for being brave enough to lose by their rules so we could win by ours. She smiled against his chest, too tired to respond verbally but squeezing his hand in acknowledgement. And they fell asleep like that, surrounded by the quiet evidence of their beautiful failure, their impossible love, their heart won happily ever after. The end.